On Thursday, August 1st, 2013, U.S. Army Vice Chief of Staff and former commander of the 101st Airborne Division, General John F. Campbell, paid a visit to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. He took a few minutes from his busy schedule to talk with local media.
All right, I guess you want me right here. How's everybody doing? Staying out of trouble?
Okay, Brian.
How you doing? How you doing? Good to see you. How you doing? All right. This is great. Hey, let me just start with some opening comments. I really want to take your questions. Go anywhere you want to go. I'm out here as the Vice Chief of Staff, been in that position about 4 months. As many of you know, I was here at Fort Campbell, left here in 2011, had a great time, and it's pretty awesome to come back and see the Screaming Eagles in Fort Campbell and talk to many of the soldiers and the great civilians and the leadership here. I'm on a Health of the Force trip. I went to Picatinny Arsenal yesterday to really look at a post that had mostly civilians, about 92% civilians. I went to Fort Drum yesterday, left there this morning, looked at a ForceCom post. I'm here at Fort Campbell today and tomorrow morning, and then I'll leave and go to Fort Jackson, which is a TRADOC, predominantly a training post in South Carolina. And I'm really focusing on Health of the Force and Ready and Resilient campaign, something that the Army put out in a campaign order in the March timeframe. It is really not a new program, but it's sort of an umbrella to take all of these other programs that the Army has going on: suicide prevention, SHARP, transition, education, ACAP, and try to see what synergy we can get. So as we move forward and as our budget decreases, we can only afford certain programs. And what I want to do is make sure we get the right programs for our Army, the right programs that fit Fort Campbell, the right ones that fit here, may not fit Fort Drum or Picatinny Arsenal or Fort Jackson. So we're trying to really take a balance of that. So I don't get out of the Pentagon a whole bunch, and a great opportunity to get out and have some touch points with the great folks here. I've seen a lot of great initiatives here at Fort Campbell. They're leading the way in many things in the Ready and Resilient campaign. If you go around and ask a soldier, hey, do you understand Ready and Resilient? They may not know it in that term, but they understand bits and pieces of it. So what we're really trying to do is get some synergy again and make sure we can do what's best for them. Fort Campbell, as you know, unlike many of our posts, because we've been drawn down in Afghanistan, has to continue to not take care of soldiers back here and families back there, but also those soldiers that are in the fight. And you know that these families and these soldiers and the folks here have sacrificed a great deal, but they're still in the fight today. If you live in Washington, D.C. like I do sometimes, you forget about that. So in the month of June, we had over 230 soldiers wounded. In the month of July, close to 200 wounded, right? And several killed in both those months. But you don't hear about that. And we can never, ever forget about the continuing fight in Afghanistan, and Fort Campbell's tied into that today as we speak here. General McConville deployed forward, has RCEs. I was there about a month and a half ago. I was able to talk to General McConville and the leadership at 101st, and they're doing absolutely great. I feel very confident that the Afghan corps that they're dealing with, the Afghan National Police and the Afghan Border Police that General McConville and Regional Command East are training with, continue to grow their capability, and that the Afghans have taken the lead in many of those places, and I saw that, and General McConville folks told me that as well. There's some issues that the Afghans will continue to have that are tough, but the same things that are tough with our forces, and that's logistics, that's intelligence, that's medevac, that's joint fires. All of those things will continue to have problems. They'll continue to work that. And then they got to work some governance piece, and I know General McConville, General Milley, the IJC commander, continue to work that. So, but I went to Afghanistan to predominantly look at retrograde and making sure we can get out that equipment that the U.S. Army's had over there for years and years and years. But going back to Ready and Resilient, the real reason I'm out here at Fort Campbell is really take a look at these programs. I'm encouraged by what I see here, the initiatives I've seen here on sponsorship, on many of the other programs that they have here. They have a good handle, they have a good battle rhythm. I think they got some very good systems. Now what we have to do is make sure that we take some of the best practices here, take those forward and make those a standard for the Army. And we got to make sure that we can continue to resource them at the right level that we can carry this out. So that's what I've been out here for. So with that, I'd be proud to take any questions that you may have here. Don't everybody ask at one time. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Brett Barricade with the Associated Press.
Yeah.
Just shifting quickly from resilience, Secretary Hagel's remarks yesterday.
But I'm not going to let you get away unless you ask me a Ready Resilient question sometime during this briefing, but go ahead.
Secretary Hagel yesterday mentioned that the reduction in force, possibly an additional 70,000 soldiers.
How many?
70,000 more soldiers. How will that affect the readiness overall of the Army and a post like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you know, probably on about the 25th of June, somewhere around there, General Odierno went out and made the announcement that we had to cut 12 BCTs, right? But that was based on the Budget Control Act of 2011. So we went from a high, or going from a high of 570,000 in 2010 to 490,000 potentially by the end of 17, and we may have to move that forward. We're not sure. We're going to continue to work that piece out. So those cuts, again, were based on pre-sequestration. We felt pretty good as we took a look at the strategy and as we went and looked at what the Army has to do for our nation, that we grew about the same amount over the course of the last 10 or 12 years because of Iraq and Afghanistan, the active did. So prior to 9/11, we were about 482, 483, and we're going to 490. So we're going to come down to about a little bit higher than pre-9/11 numbers. So we felt where the strategy was at, that we can live by that. We could also set the ramp on how fast we were going to come down. The Army was going to be able to control that. We took very little out of the National Guard, about 8,000, but no force structure. We only took 1,000 out of the USAR, and again, no force structure. But I can't emphasize enough, that's all pre-sequestration, all right? So what Secretary Hagel was talking about, if we stay on this path to full sequestration, my read right now is there's no forcing mechanism to have Congress come together to change that. And so we're probably going to enter 14, and we won't have a budget, all right? I'm hopeful that we will, but if we don't have a budget, you go into a Continuing Resolution Act, and we'll have to plan at worst case, which is full sequestration. And based on trying to balance a couple different levers out there between end strength, between modernization, and then readiness, those are the decisions that General Odierno and Secretary McHugh have to make so that we don't become a hollow force. What you don't want to do is have a lot of end strength and no equipment, and very low readiness, where you want to have a very small force and a whole bunch of equipment that you have nobody to use on it. So it's a balance between end strength, modernization. There's about 500 different programs the Army's working out there, and then readiness. So that's the dynamic that we have to deal with. And so as we look at what potentially the budget will be underneath full sequestration, General Odierno testified a while back that we could potentially have to lose another 100,000 soldiers. I can't speak for the other services, but 100,000 soldiers. And that'll probably be across all three compos, both the active, the Guard, and the Reserve. Now, again, we didn't take any out of the Guard force structure, and we didn't take any out of the Reserve. There'll probably have to be some force structure. I think it'll probably be a smaller percentage than the active. But again, those will be very, very tough decisions because the Guard is spread out in very few in different states, and those will be very tough decisions as we move forward. So 100,000 is a number that was sort of a planning figure we've looked at, but you know, we'll have to take a hard look at other pieces, so the modernization piece of it. But the issue that we have is that we can't bring down the end strength quick enough to garner any savings. And until we get to that 490 number, we don't get any savings anyway, because everything above 490 is paid in OCO. And that was passed in the NDA here a couple of years ago. So we got to balance that, but that number's probably 100,000. That potentially could mean several other brigades will have to come out, all right? Don't know what that is, but bottom line, it'll be a much smaller Army. But again, we made the brigades on the first part. We were able to reorganize the brigade. So if you take out a brigade at Fort Campbell, all right, you're going to reorganize that and add a 3rd Maneuver Battalion each brigade. You're going to add an engineer battalion. You're going to take and change the structure of the artillery and make that a more capable brigade combat team. So we'll have less brigades, but they'll be more agile, more capable. You're going to lose many 06 or BCT level headquarters. That's that tooth to tail ratio. Again, pre-sequestration. If we go in sequestration, every cut we make, we have no place to reorganize now. That'll be a full chop of that brigade and all those enablers out there. So that's pretty drastic.
Blake Farmer with NPR in Nashville. You know, we hear a lot from the Pentagon about concerns about, I guess, readiness, the strength of the military after these cuts. I'm wondering, with these guys and gals who've been, you know, recruited, joined up over the last few years to go to war, they know they're going, is there any obligation that the military has to keep them employed in the military if they saw this as a career, you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. First off, you know, we're very, very fortunate. We have great men and women that continue in the time of war, sign up and join the military, all services. You know, we just celebrated the 40th anniversary of the all-volunteer force. So we're very fortunate to be able to have that. But, you know, being in the military is not a right. It's a privilege. And as we move forward, what we have to really do is make sure as we get smaller, we have to have the best soldiers that we can keep in the Army. So I'm really worried about the quality, not the quantity. And so we've really pushed that down to the leadership. We let General Conville, we let brigade commanders dictate which soldiers stay in or which soldiers don't stay in. So years past on re-enlistment, you know, it would be kind of like a competition, see how many people you can keep in. We need all those people. We'll give you a trophy if you reach certain levels at a certain time. We've gone away from that, all right? And what we've told our commanders is you pick the right people that want to stay in. So if you want to enlist, re-enlist, then you have to be the right quality that we need. So the people that have joined, you know, that said, hey, maybe I want to spend 20 years, and they come and they have to re-enlist, and that's kind of why you have these gates. They got to make sure they're performing the standard. If they're performing the standard, they stay motivated, they want to continue to do good, then for the most part, you know, I think that leadership will see that, and they'll be able to stay in. As we drop from the 570 to 490, we're doing most of this by natural attrition. So that's pretty good. But we're going to come to a point that we're going to have to make some very tough decisions, and we're going to have soldiers leave involuntarily. Now, we're going to do that with colonels. This month, we're having a RIF board. It'll take a look at colonels. It'll be a very small number as we go out, because we manage officers by year group. So I think we owe soldiers that want to stay in the Army, that are doing all the things that are required to be in the Army, to stay motivated, that want to contribute to a team that's bigger than themselves, which all of them want to do, then we'll try to keep all those soldiers. But it's going to be a smaller Army, and the quality of that Army has to be the very best. That's what our nation expects from us. They don't care that we're going to have sequestration or not. What they care about is they ask us to go someplace, we're prepared to go.
But does that add to the, you know, you've got folks who are coming back and dealing with a lot of stuff.
Phil, you can smack him because he's got a follow-on question, but go ahead.
But I wonder, I mean, you've got these folks coming back, they're dealing with the issues of having been deployed multiple times over the years, family issues, whatnot. Does that, I mean, it would seem to add to the stress big time to know that the continued employment in the military is only going to be more difficult.
Yeah, well, what we do and what I think owe the soldiers, if they have issues, and we have to take care of those issues. All right, so we have this thing called Soldier for Life, and what that is taking a soldier when they come into the military, build that resiliency, help them as they continue to grow, give them those tool sets to help them deal with stressors in their life, and then help them transition out of the Army, whether that's after one enlistment, whether that's after 20 years, and then help them transition into civilian society, and they're going to be better citizens of our nation having served in our Army. If the soldier comes back and he has an issue, then we're not going to let that soldier get out until we're obligated to take care of that issue, all right? Just like anything else. If it's a medical issue, we do what we can on the medical piece. At some point in time where that soldier doesn't meet those standards, where they can stay in the Army, and there's a transition, and that transition's getting much better between Army, DOD, and Veterans Affairs. And then that's what Veterans Affairs is there, to take care of those soldiers. So that transition, I think we're really working on very hard. Again, if there's an issue like that, we'll take care of it. But some of the issues we have, the trends that we've seen, that leads to suicides, that leads to other challenges that we have out there, is financial issues, is relationships, is alcohol, those kind of things. So we do take a hard look at that and make sure that we have the best programs that we have, and we have many, many programs, sometimes too many, that it's hard to determine which one I got to go to. So we got to have the right programs to take care of issues for our soldiers. Yeah.
Phil Gray, Leaf Chronicle. In line with what Blake was saying, you know, a couple of months ago, granted the Army has a lot of pressing issues. A couple of months ago, the Chief of Staff of the Army said sexual assault prevention is our #1 priority. I understand what he meant. A lot of people understand what he meant. But do you think there's a danger by saying that of making people think that of the military as a jobs program, social engineering, rather than its #1 priority, which is fighting and winning the nation's wars? Is there a danger of falling into that trap of putting that perception in the public mind that the Army's priority is something other than fighting and winning?
No, I don't think so. I think this is so vulgar to us that we have soldiers attacking other soldiers like an insider threat, right, in Afghanistan that our soldiers over there have to deal with. But when you have soldiers attacking other soldiers, that is so bad that if we don't make that a huge part of the Army, we're never going to get after. And that's where General Odierno was at. He absolutely understands that we have to make sure that we man, equip, and train those going over the war fight. We can't send people into harm's way. He understands that what the nation expects of us is to fight and win our nation's war. That's why you have an army. All right? So when he said that, that was to get our soldiers and our leaders to understand that, hey, this is important. All right? This is bad. Is it as bad as a college or a university? It doesn't matter. All right? Are suicides in the Army lower than they are in civilian society? It doesn't matter. All right? We hold our soldiers to a higher standard. All right? And if we have an issue, we're going to attack it, and we're going to go after it, and we're going to make sure we do what's right for our families, our soldiers, and our civilians. But no, I don't think that message was mixed with our leadership. I don't think that message was mixed with our soldiers. I feel very confident that we're going to continue to take that head on. When we have a problem, it's in our DNA to go after it. Some problems like suicide is frustrating because we continue to work at that hard, and we haven't found that silver bullet that'll help stop that. So we got to continue to stay after that. Yeah.
Hi, Jen. I've read about toxic leadership getting out of the Army, but isn't toxic leadership that we're trying to get rid of also the ones making the decisions on who stays in the Army and who stays and who gets out? So sort of a springboard from his question, I was here at Fort Campbell, and my leadership, anyway, toxic is all I have to say. But she was the one in charge of whether I stayed in or whether I got out. And how does that make sense to us?
Yeah, well, first off, if we have toxic leadership, hopefully we can hold leadership accountable and we can get rid of that. What the Army's done over the last 2 years probably, and we don't announce, or like if you're in the Navy and you hit another ship or you run aground, big news how you're getting kicked out of the Navy. In the last 2 years, the Army has relieved over 30 battalion and brigade level commanders, right, 30 plus. So that's holding leadership accountability. Well, we don't just go out and say, hey, here's what we're doing, but we absolutely are trying, and we do to the best of our ability hold leadership accountable. We got to continue to do that. Okay, you're right. At the 06 level, at the 05 level, they have a huge responsibility, and we entrust them with these young men and women to serve our country, and they make decisions that impact their lives, whether it's a UCMJ decision, right, to take money, put them in prison, change their life forever. And what we try to do is make sure we have the leadership development tools in place to educate them, to grow them, and put them in, and don't put them in positions of responsibility unless they have that skill set and the character to be able to do that. What's you really got to look at is character and his competence. And what's really scary, and the chief has said this before, is you have a leader that's very, very competent, but he doesn't have character, and that's probably the worst kind. And so we look at that very, very hard. And hopefully in those cases where a leader has been toxic or has been a leader that didn't have character and made a decision on a soldier in a negative way, that soldier was able to take that and appeal that in another, hiring. There's always venues for soldiers out there to appeal decisions to a higher level leadership. When I tell all of our soldiers out there, if you've had in your mind an injustice done, then you got to raise it to the next level. Right? The next level higher leadership is at the company, take it to the battalion. If you're not satisfied there, take it to the brigade, go to the IG. There's a lot of different venues out there for our soldiers, but we got to continue to enable our leaders to make the right decisions and continue to hold leaders accountable. Please, up there.
Bill Ossey, Clark's Online. With the cuts happening now, the potential for future deeper cuts coming in, plus the drawdown in Afghanistan, is this a concern in the Army that a budget-conscious Congress will come in and attempt to use a peace dividend to do more drastic cuts to the military?
Well, I think $500 billion is pretty dang drastic already. I'm not sure how far they can go. Right? So $487 billion already. The Army took 35% of that cut, higher than the other services. On this other $500 billion, we're going to continue to work that. No budget yet. So what I first hope would happen is that Congress would come together and make a decision on sequestration. Right? So we don't have a budget yet. We got to figure that piece out. So I'm not even worried about the next step that you talked about. I'm worried about getting a budget for 14. The hardest part we have is the uncertainty. Right? We need some certainty on it as we plan our budget. We wouldn't ask you to run your household like that on a checkbook, right? Very, very tough on decisions we have to make and the programs that we deal with. So on the modernization, if you have an account, like on a helicopter, let's say, right? You have a new helicopter, you're gonna go after a helicopter that you wanna add a new modification on, but you don't know what your budget's gonna be. You know, what can you do? You can either stop that program, you can either lengthen it out, all right? So we're gonna get it done in 2 years, now it's gonna take 5 years. You can buy less, or you can terminate. I mean, you don't have a whole bunch of options here. And you don't wanna make a decision now that you can't undo, but you may make that decision based on what you think's gonna happen, all right? We don't wanna do that. So what we try to do is provide the chief and the Secretary of the Army the best information we have now to make those decisions. But the uncertainty of what our budget will be is what is killing us right now.
Hi, Carla Jimenez, with the Kentucky New Era. Sort of going back to the resiliency programs, a lot of them are headed up by civilian workers. How are these furloughs going to affect those programs if they're continuing to be run by civilians?
Yeah, well, right now, the furloughs is impacting, as you know, here at Fort Campbell and all of our post-cancer stations. Furlough was something we thought would never happen, sort of like sequestration. But it was a DOD decision. All the services got furloughed the same, started at 22, went down to 11. I think we've executed 3. Secretary Hagel said yesterday we're going to look at buying back. We look at it as buying back readiness. So somebody would say, hey, what's changed since, you know, when you came out with furlough? So just in the last 2 weeks, where we had a bill, in 13 I talked about $8.3 billion, you know, we've been able to reprogram, we've changed what we're doing in theater a little bit. So if we can buy back some readiness, we're absolutely going to do that. But the impact that we've had on any post-camper station, same thing with Fort Campbell, where in the past, some of our great civilians may work, you know, they're getting paid for 40 hours, right? But they're working 50 hours, all right? They're doing a lot more than 40 hours. And now, based on the rules that are set with this furlough, you chop off that one day, and they can only work 32 hours, all right? So it's not a function of just losing that 1 8-hour, you're losing 32 to whatever they were working overtime because they had that passion, that dedication. You know, many of our great civilians ain't worried about the money. They're worried about not being able to get that mission done. So what I'm very thankful is that we've got great civilians that continue to have patience with us, and hopefully will stick with us as we work through these tough times. But I can't tell them what's going to happen in 14. Right? Again, I don't have a budget, so we're going to have to work through it. But it does impact, and there's a magnitude of more than just that one day that we're losing by not having our civilians, and it impacts our readiness.
Annie Catherine, WKZ, it's good
Good to
to
see
have
you.
you back. We're glad you're here at Fort Campbell. The local post is really excited about the resiliency programs that they've got, the master resiliency trainers and the lifeliners with their resiliency center. What have you heard from them about the resiliency program, and what are you taking back with you to the Pentagon?
Great question. Again, we had a good overview from the leadership and from all the program directors in this room here earlier today. We broke out into some focus groups where we were able to take a look at a little bit more specific into some areas. I brought some folks from our SHARP program. I brought some folks from the Surgeon Generals, and I brought Lieutenant General Ferrer, who's the commander of IMCOM here. And they're hitting these focus groups as well. Tomorrow I got several more, so I think we'll get some additional information that we'll take back. We're looking at best practices out there, what we can spread around to the Army. We're looking at what they're doing here that may not work someplace else. We're looking at, you know, what are the right programs, what programs don't we need that may be redundant. And so as we move forward, we got to look through that. Again, how they in-process soldiers here, how they do sponsorship, how they run their governance, and how that reports to the senior mission commander here, General Stammer, is the standard, I think, for our Army. So he's able to bring in all of the stakeholders on a frequency where they've met and they bring those issues, and he makes those decisions at his level. And it's a really an integrated approach as opposed to being stovepipe. This one's doing this stovepipe, and they've integrated that, and he's able to take that information and make the best decisions for Fort Campbell. So we're going to take that back as a best practice to make sure you know, our other commands are doing that. So I'll learn some more tomorrow. I already knew before I came out there that they're doing some awfully good things here, and just reinforced my mind. We've got some great leadership, we've got some great civilians, we've got some great non-commissioned officers and family members. All right, one more question.
With the readiness, is there a risk of, I mean, it seems to me that you all have been just throwing money at suicide, mental health issues. I mean, anybody who thinks they have something that might work, I know it's been more diligent than that, but, you know, is there a risk you remove something, you realize you actually have been holding back the problem, and things could have even been worse? I mean, how closely will you be watching those numbers, for instance, like the suicide?
Yeah, I watch numbers every single day. Every single suicide, gets reported at my level very quickly. All the details that we know at that particular point, I see those, whether it's active, whether it's guard, whether it's reserve, whether they're not on active duty in either one of those compos. We try to learn from that. We try to understand the trends from that. We try to take best practice on different post-cancer stations. The frustrating thing is when you put all of this energy in there and you still haven't changed that dynamic, then what's the definition of success? You only have one suicide? That's still bad. So we got to look hard at where we go. And again, we've got the best minds in industry looking at MIT. I took a brief from them the other day on things that they're taking a look at to help us. We're looking at science and technology. We're looking at all sorts of things to see what we can do to help provide tools. But in the end, where it really gets down to, I think, for our soldiers, our non-commissioned officers have to embrace this. They've got to have engaged leadership, and they've really got to know and understand every single thing they can about their soldiers. They got to know if they got financial problems. They got to know where they live. All right? They got to know if they're into alcohol. They got to know all those. And there's some red lines out there that when they come up, then we got to get them the right help, and then we got to follow up. We're learning some things. It's like taking a targeting process, and we're very good at that. We analyze a whole bunch of different things out there, and we focus on that target, and we apply those resources to that target set, and hopefully get at that. They showed me a report the other day from MIT, and it may be common sense, but a soldier or family member that's been hospitalized for behavioral health is at an 80% higher chance than another soldier of committing suicide. Certain MOSs out there that are a higher percentage of doing suicide attempts. So we got to look at those MOSs and then maybe look at our resources that way. We're pulling out all the stops here. We got to take a hard look in the National Guard. I can tell you we can focus on these 3 states are the states that have the most suicides. Why? What day is it happening on? What time of day is it happening on? All right? So it's sort of like taking all those forensics out there, targeting that, because we're very good at that, and attacking that. That doesn't work, back off. Let's go someplace else. So we're not going to give up on this. We're going to continue to put the resources toward it. And I think we all have a part to play. All of our soldiers have a part to play in this engaged leadership, so we'll stay after it. Hey, thanks very much for taking the time. What I tell you is that, especially here at Fort Campbell, I saw it at Fort Drum as well. You've got an organization here that continues to stay in the warfight. And as we downsize out of Afghanistan, not all of our divisions, not all of our brigades will do that. So we got to make sure we continue to provide them the resources that we have over the last 10 or 12 years. They're making a big difference where they're at. I tell all of our soldiers and our leaders here that, when you become frustrated about things that are going on, then go to Walter Reed, right? Go to BAMC, go see our great soldiers. Ann and I were there last week. Went to the MATC and saw 2 quadruple amputees, right? And their passion about life and their energy, it just makes you feel good. If they can work through what they got, we can work through what we got. We got many 101st soldiers that continue to stay up there. We got many that have returned back here. We can never ever forget their sacrifice. We can never ever forget the sacrifice of their families. And I ask for your continued support as you report out there to keep that message out there for our Gold Star families, for our wounded warriors, because we have a debt that doesn't stop December 2014. All right, we got to carry that on for life, and we'll be dependent upon you and the media to help tell that story. So thanks for what you do. It's great to be here at Fort Campbell Air Assault.
This is Mark Haynes reporting for Clarksville Online.